Hello, everybody. Day 3 of our quest to learn economics through virtual classrooms. So I hope by now, if you're having trouble, you have reached out to me and I've tried to set something up to help you learn better. So with that, we are going to continue on in talking about the gross domestic product and its importance. So far we've learned kind of what's included in it, what it is. Yesterday, how it's really calculated, and we calculate our real GDP because that is much more important than our nominal GDP. And today we're going to kind of figure out why, okay? The reason why it's important is because what real GDP really shows us is where our country is at in our business cycle of the economy, okay? An economy cannot grow up and go up forever. An economy is never staying the same. Just based on the very basic laws of supply and demand, we know that the economy is going to have to shift, okay? And it will never, ever remain the same. So generally speaking, we categorize really 4 different stages of a business cycle. And generally speaking, the business cycle looks something like this, okay? So if we were to measure the economic activity of a society, of a country, the GDP, right? What's being made and produced, okay? And you look at it over time, it's never going to always go up, right? So let's start here with this time of expansion, right? During a time of expansion, the economy is improving, the economy is producing more things. When the economy is producing more things, more people are working to make those things. When more people are working, they get paid more. When they get paid more, they buy more things, which means more things get produced. And it's this beautiful upward spiral that we call expansion. However, expansion cannot happen forever. Eventually, okay, we reach a peak and we enter into a contraction. Now, as we enter into a contraction, or what some people call a recession, what you see happen is the economic growth slows down. Less products get made. Because less products get made, less people have jobs. Because people have jobs, people get paid less. Because people get paid less, they buy less things. And thus, the downward spiral begins. Until eventually, the economy, based on supply and demand, turns around again back into an expansion. Okay? Now, what GDP does is it tells us if we are in that expansion or that contraction. Very simply, if GDP goes up during a year or a quarter of a year, that means the economy is expanding. More things are being produced. If GDP goes down, that means less things are being produced. So let's start with everyone's favorite, the expansion part. Okay, this is a period of economic growth measured by an increase in the country's real GDP. It is often signaled and correlated with unemployment. Okay, as more things are getting made, that means more workers are needed, and based on that, people make more money and they spend more money, and the economy is in a beautiful upward spiral. We have been in the longest period of economic expansion in United States history. From 2009 through the start of 2020, we were in economic expansion. Who knows? We might still be, although with the fears of the coronavirus, and I got a feeling that economic expansion has probably come to its end. Okay. Now, you guys should remember from supply and demand, okay, that as people make more money, okay, they buy more things. As they buy more things, that causes demand to shift to the right, an increase. When demand shifts to the right, it causes an increase in price, right? So with this, eventually during times of an expansion, prices just get too high. Things are just too expensive. The economy is just too good. It's too expensive to start a new business. It's too expensive to buy a new house. It's too expensive to buy that new car you wanted to because the demand is so high. So eventually, we reach a peak. We reach a moment where the prices are so high, the GDP is at its highest it's going to be, and usually a decline is going to follow. That decline is what we call a contraction. A contraction happens when growth begins to slow down, right? That means less is getting produced, which means less people are working, which means less people are spending their money, okay? Which means more people get fired, and it may become what we call a recession. A recession would be 2 quarters or more. So that would mean a quarter's 3 months. So that would be 6 months of negative GDP growth. If the GDP goes down for 2 months, okay, that means that we are in an economic recession. Okay. With a recession, you will see the unemployment rate begin to go up. More people will be losing their jobs, which will cause spending to slow. Now, what that does, though, okay, is it shifts demand to the left. As people lose their jobs, they then buy less things. As they buy less things, the prices for things go down until eventually we reach what is called the trough. This is the lowest and worst the economy is going to be. It's when, though, the real GDP stops declining and the economy begins to show that it might turn around. For example, let's say the economy is really bad. Mr. Cole, right now, I am currently renting an apartment, but I would like to buy a house at some point. Right now, house prices are too high. But let's say we go through an economic recession, and if I feel comfortable enough to buy a house, right, then I would go and I'd see how low the home prices are during the recession, and I would jump on that opportunity to buy. Other people like me would do the same thing, and it would start us going into an upward spiral where we begin spending more money and getting more faith in the economy. I have this big chart here, and I don't think it's really that huge for you to understand, but I want you to notice what the very top part of the downward spiral is. It's consumers do not feel confident about the economy, so they buy less stuff, right? In turn, that causes people to have to be laid off. Producers have to lay off stuff because they are not making as much money, so they have to fire workers. Those then workers don't have as much money to spend, and it creates a downward spiral that eventually encompasses the entire economy. Now, the funny part is that we did not really understand this until about the late 1800s, early 1900s. In fact, the original belief of how economic downturns happen was that they were controlled by God. Today we know that economic recessions are not acts of God, but are actually acts of people. And that we are ultimately the ones who determine if the economy is going to be good or the economy is going to be bad. If we consumers are trusting of the economy, if we are confident and we spend our money, the economy will keep expanding. It is when we grow unconfident, is that a word? Unconfident? I don't know. In the economy, when we don't trust it anymore, and we hold our money back, and we keep our money in savings, and don't put our money out in actually spending it, that we actually cause the recession ourselves. So when you actually want to look at who to blame for economic downturns, it is not some mysterious force causing this. It's people acting in their own self-interests, right? With that, if we were to enter a recession due to the coronavirus, it is not the virus that's causing the recession. It's people not spending their money because or not being able to spend their money because of the virus, not necessarily the virus itself. It's all eventually comes back to us as people. Now, the reason why that we are okay with this is because if you really look at the expansions and contractions, and you take these ups and downs over time, and you put a line of best fit on them for the last 200, 300 years, you will see that the economic expansions are way longer than the economic recessions. For example, our last recession was 2008. Okay, we had about 3 or 4 quarters, so about a year of economic recession. Turned around into that, we have been in 10 years of economic expansion. So when you really put it and you chart it out, you can see that through the ups and the downs, the economy usually improves a little bit every year. And that's ultimately the goal of all this. Okay, to show you that data, and this is the last thing I'll show you. So you can see here, this is a percentage of quarter-to-quarter growth in real GDP. So, for example, in the fourth quarter of 2007, okay, we had about 1.8% GDP growth. So that's small growth, but it's still growth. Growth is a good thing. You can see, though, at the start of 2008 began a series of negative growths. -2, although +1, but then followed by -4, -9, which is enormous, -7, huge drops in GDP, enormous ones, okay, and then -1. But you can see, though, and in the third quarter of 2003, it began to turn around, and we have had positive, for the most part, GDP growth ever since. Now, there are always little moments, right? There are always times where the GDP maybe goes down a little bit, as you can see maybe here in the first quarter of 2014. That can be caused by a variety of factors. I guarantee you that with the coronavirus, GDP growth will probably be negative for this quarter. That does not mean that we're in a recession, though, until we have back-to-back quarters. If there's ever back-to-back quarters, we would be in a recession. Okay? So with that, that's the big takeaway today on business cycles, okay, on the expansions and the peaks. Remember, it's all controlled by us acting in our own self-interest. If we trust the economy, we buy things and things are happy. If we don't trust the economy, we save our money, we protect our money, and we crash the economy ourselves, okay? But ultimately, by the same version, we are the people that get ourselves out of a recession, right? When we trust the economy again and we go and we start to buy things, we turn that economy around ourselves. So that's the big takeaway today. And I hope that everybody's having a good day. And please, again, reach out to me if you have any questions. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.